I'd like to welcome Dr. Alan Skinner, who will be presenting today on a unique engineering feature located on Cottonwood Creek in Collin County, Texas. Dr. Skinner received his PhD in anthropology from Southern Methodist University in 1974. He has over 50 years of archaeological experience and has worked in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Utah. His research interests include hunting and gathering societies, lithic technology, and historic Native American sites. Today, he is the president and owner of AR Consultants Incorporated, located in Richardson, Texas. Welcome, Dr. Skinner, and with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Drew, and let's get started here. 24 years ago, AR Consultants conducted an archaeological survey of the proposed Allen Station Park in north central Collin County. The park was named for the Allen train depot, which was located south of a reported stone dam that created a pond in the Cottonwood Creek Valley. City leaders knew about the historic dam, and it was included in the park area for future development. As it turns out, this was important because the original dams for a new roadway to be known as Exchange Parkway would have destroyed the old stone dam. The city and historic preservationists lobbied TxDOT to relocate the road, which they did. The road was moved downstream and took out an even larger but also abandoned dam that had been built in 1912. Remember that we're concerned with the stone dam. Having seen a variety of concrete, earthen, and stone armored dams in north central Texas, I didn't anticipate recording a unique historic engineering structure that had avoided destruction and was a remnant of the earliest railway in Texas. My wife and I recorded this stone dam that you see in this photograph and associated features, which include the foundation of a pump house and the base of an elevated water tank, all of which are referred to as the Allen Watering Station. We initially did not fully appreciate the archaeological site's significance or how the city and the Allen Heritage Guild would work to preserve it and its history. This picture shows a row of capstones you see here on the top of the dam itself and on the back side of the dam, so the upstream side of the dam. And it also shows the exposed opening of the sluice in the downstream face. This is the sluice here of the dam. The dam had been built in 1874 near where the Houston and Texas Central Railway tracks crossed Cottonwood Creek, less than 2 miles north of where the train stop community of Allen had yet to be established. So Allen wasn't there when the watering station and the dam were constructed. Midway between the creek and the dam is the foundation of a gasoline-powered pump house that you see right here, where this concrete motor mount contains. The motor mount is right here, and the rest of this are parts of the pump house itself. There are 4 threaded bars mounted or anchored in the concrete motor mount that have been bent over here, but you can see where they are located and where the motor was located. A series, now water was actually pumped into this rectangular storage area, from there to the pump, and from there upstream, upslope, to what you see in the background, and we'll look at another photograph of that. A series of 12 chisel-cut block piers located adjacent to the track being to the left of the slide, supported an elevated water tank that provided clean water for steam engines running north-south between Houston and Red River City, which is known today as Denison. Each pier, each one of these piers, is composed of at least 4 blocks that are mortared together and make a modern-day Texas Stonehenge, which is unique in itself. The blue X's mark piers that have been largely obscured by railroad ballast that probably postdates the use of the elevated tank. The dam is made of horizontally laid limestone blocks that were set in sandy mortar. The dam surface, this is the surface of the dam. This is the row of capstones you see here. And you can see that structurally, these stones are much better formed than this stone, which was quarried and used pretty much in its original shape as quarried. The dam spans the width of the creek, and abutments anchor the east and the west ends of the dam. The rock source is unknown. We haven't been able to determine where the rock came from. But the blocks appear to have been quarried. That is to say, these blocks in the dam itself with pry bars, as shown in this historic photograph of some place in central Texas where they were mining rock. And you can see the pry bars these guys were using, and maybe a hydraulic breaker as well. And then the rock was pulleyed over here and put on the railroad track, the railroad train. The blocks were apparently mined along fault or fracture lines, and many of them present flat surfaces that could have been used in a dam without significant shaping. Sometime in 1907, Joe Wallace Bridges proposed marriage to Antha Lee Wisenant at the base of the Allen watering station tank. Now, I assume this location was important to the couple, but we do not know why it was selected. They were married in a quiet ceremony at the home of Rule Erickson on September 8th of that year. The unfortunate side note to this marriage proposal is that Mrs. Bridges was killed in 1945 when the car she was driving was hit by a steam engine in town near the Allen train depot. Now, if you have ever read any Zane Grey or some Elmer Kelton novels or watched 1950s Westerns on TV, you should be aware that trains stopped regularly at elevated water tanks, such as this one that we see here at the Allen Station Dam, in order to replenish water lost as steam. These water tanks were usually associated with a windmill, which served to refill the water tanks and thus the engines. It just so happens in these stories that outlaws frequently stopped by and robbed the train of whatever cash or gold it was carrying at the places where the train stopped at the tanks. But at this location in Collin County, the railway company built a dam and pump station, even though there were windmills elsewhere along the Houston and Texas Central Railway route between Houston and Denison, and at farmsteads, whistle-stop towns, and crossroad communities throughout the county. So why was this dam built here, and why was it used different and not a windmill? However, the dam was faced with a silting problem, even though the dam had a clean-out sluice gate that we looked at earlier. And the first attempt to increase water capacity had been to install the row of mortared capstones on top of the dam. And this is that row of capstones that we saw earlier. And the sluiceway opening is right here. And water's coming through this gap in the capstones. This raised the water level, but apparently the sluice gate and the capstones didn't work well enough. So in 1912, the railroad company built a higher dam downstream, and a significantly larger pond was created. This new dam was made with reinforced concrete that you see here and had rubble fill. The rock rubble was a pink granite. The dam consisted of a sloping bulkhead about 15 to 20 feet tall with support buttresses that you see here at 15-foot intervals on the downstream side of the bulkhead. And we don't know if any marriage proposals were ever offered here, but this unknown couple is shown on the dam crest sometime after 1912. And the sign here says 1912. The elevated water tank for the Allen Station Dam, and probably the top of the pump house you see here, are shown in the background adjacent to the railroad bridge over Cottonwood Creek. Unfortunately, the Stonehenge base of the tank is not visible. All we can see are the legs, but that's what we've got. In this light, remember that the old stone dam was unintentionally inundated by the new and larger pond, but the pump house was probably still in use. An interesting story about the stone dam is set during the Depression, when local kids would take town visitors out to the creek to show them how they had learned to walk on water at the watering station pond. Turns out that if you knew where to enter the pond, you could walk across the lake on the hidden tops of the capstones without getting very wet. Of course, their friends didn't know where to get in and got wet in the process of learning how to walk on water. By the time World War II ended, fewer water stations were needed along railroad routes because of technological improvements in steam engines. So the concrete dam, this dam here, was abandoned and ultimately was breached by floodwater erosion. It remained in place until a final decision was made about the routing of Exchange Parkway, and then it was demolished, leaving the old stone dam still in place and presenting an interesting historic feature that would ultimately be included in the Allen Station Park. In a short time, the city staff and the Heritage Guild became concerned that erosion caused by flooding, such as this, you can see this actually is a photograph taken during our excavation season there in the winter of 2002, and that's snow. That's the white stuff that we don't ever hardly get up in this part of the state. And the water actually got higher than this photograph shows. So, and on the east end of the dam over here, that you see in a drier time period, rocks were falling out of the abutment wall, even though the wall was short and was anchored in the Austin bedrock, Austin chalk. This is Austin chalk exposed here and here, and made a good anchor for the dam itself. This is original dam construction. This is the row of capstones that were put in to raise up the level of the pond. On the west, the length of the abutment was unknown, but did not appear to be anchored in bedrock. Furthermore, the downstream bank was being eroded away, as you see here, And the fear was that this western abutment and part of the dam would be washed out by creek flooding. Ultimately, Half Associates was employed to develop a plan to stabilize the banks and the abutments, and this required diverting water from below the dam, making it dry down here, and ultimately they pumped water out from upstream and had to dam it off up here as well. And they recommended that rock-filled wire basket gabions be installed on both banks, but with particular concern for the western end of the dam. Operating under a Texas Antiquities permit, AR Consultants explored the western extent of the dam and abutment and reconstructed the history of dam construction. The original dam was made of roughly shaped limestone blocks that were laid to create a massive weight-held dam between the creek banks. So the creek bank at the time the dam was being built extended from this point here, this was the western end of the dam, on across the creek itself. The rocks were held together with a tough sandy brown mortar, which still functions. The blocks were placed to create roughly horizontal planes that started by being anchored in a shallow trench excavated into the underlying bedrock that was exposed below the water level. The dam measures 65 feet east-west and from 8 to 12 feet north-south and has a height of 10 feet above the bedrock. A Slough Chute is near the center of the dam. That Slough Chute is right here, as we've seen before, and measures roughly 5 feet square. A wooden gate of horizontally placed boards is located on the upstream side of the dam and was controlled by a metal sluice gate mechanism that was operated by a threaded rod that was on the west side of the gate. 2 wing walls are attached to the east end of the dam structure and are several blocks high, as we saw in that earlier picture. And they were anchored into the bedrock. The walls measure 10 feet long, 10 to 12 feet long, and the west end of the abutment was exposed manually by trenching along the face of the capstones and the abutment itself. We discovered, as a result of trenching and then test pitting, that the abutment extends 55 feet from the dam, from the west end of the dam, and that the capstones extend 24 feet from the dam itself. So at some point in the middle of this abutment, of where the abutment wall is, the capstones discontinue being used. As shown in this picture, the west wall abutment is set back on the west end of the dam structure and apparently was placed in valley fill, not on bedrock. It was significantly longer than the eastern walls, and it was lower, as you'll see in just a second. And this is the continuation of the abutment as it goes on out 55 feet. Now this is the end of the dam as it was built originally. The abutment then was only essentially 2 rocks thick and extended west for 55 feet. However, as you can see by looking at the capstones, something happened in the process in order to improve the conditions of the dam itself. Presumably due to a leakage around the west end of the dam, a concrete plug was placed slightly under the base of the western abutment. Now this plug almost just faces against the abutment here, that abutment wall. But but it's backed by valley fill, not by abutment below this elevation here. The plug goes down, the concrete plug goes down 5 feet to the bedrock and extends west for 9 feet. It's 2 feet wide at the top and expands slightly towards the base, and was created behind within a wooden form. Cast iron pipes were uncovered in front of and on top of the abutment, as you see here, and capstones were also shown on top of the abutment. Presumably the pipes carried water from the pond, which is just right behind here, but lower of course, to the pump house, and then from the pump house upslope to the water tank. Now my friend Ismael here is standing on top of the plug. Remember that the row of capstones had been placed on the surface of the dam at the upstream edge. These stones are more roughly squared than those in the dam, as we looked in an earlier picture, and they are bigger, but were anchored to each other and the top of the dam with sandy mortar. At the west end of the dam, 3 rows of capstones were placed on top of the abutment wall. So you've got a row of capstones here, a row of capstones here, which match with the capstones on top of the dam, and then a 3rd row of capstones placed here that extends on west for 24 feet. We postulate that the gap in top of the capstones on top of the dam was created either before the 1912 dam was built or after it had been abandoned and no longer held water. Now, an unexpected discovery during excavation was the end of a 4-inch diameter ceramic clay pipe that was found sticking out from the west side of the channel wall downstream from the dam. This was first recognized as a water trickle coming out of the bank. A little clearing revealed that the pipe extended back into the bank an unknown distance, but prodding produced a steady flow of water that collected in a mortared rock-lined basin that's right here. The surface of the bank also had been faced with rock and mortared in place, surrounding the pipe and keeping it in its location. We've concluded that this pipe must extend upstream under the western abutment and could have provided drinking water for residents who visited the plunge pool below the dam to swim, bathe, or to frolic. At the end of the abutment exploration, it had been possible to define the western limits of the dam abutment and the extent of the capstones that you see here. This is a map that was prepared by Half Associates. No attempt had been made to explore the depth of the abutment, but it was possible to capture the intersection of the abutment, the capstones, and the dam. Furthermore, the unique ceramic water pipe had been discovered and was to be preserved during gabion construction. Ultimately, trenches were dug into the bedrock on both banks. This is an example of the excavation of the trench that was excavated into the bedrock by Half and Associates in order to become the foundation for the gabion structure. You can see the baskets back here. The baskets contain chunks of limestone, and you can see the edge of the bank here was faced up, so they had a relatively smooth surface to back the gabions up against. Now, these gabions served to anchor the banks, and sheets of rock had been included in the outer banks of, or the outer walls of the gabions themselves, but inside. And as you see here, the rock here matches relatively well with the appearance of the dam, and that was the intent, was to make that a fairly smooth continuity between the original dam and the gabion surfaces, rather than just to have them be wire baskets with rock in them. Now, in park plans, a trail was to be constructed along the east side of the creek, and an overlook with a concrete pad was placed off the trail for the purpose of looking at the dam. Recently, a bridge that you see here was placed over the channel upstream or downstream from the dam. The entire water station and railroad bridge upstream were placed on the National Register of Historic Places and registered as a State Antiquities Landmark. The city and the Allen Heritage Guild ultimately fenced the pump station, which is right here, and the water tank footings. Looking the other direction, you can see the Stonehenge feature that we have here. In order to protect them from vandalism, which has been the bane of the railroad bridge that has been tagged numerous times. Recently, the Parks and Recreation Department created a walking trail that includes the dam, pump house, and the water tank footings, and has created graphics that explain these features. Here we have the dam in the background, and one of the graphics that has to deal with the dam itself, its construction. This is the protection fence. The pump house is back here. Another photograph closer up. This is the kind of motor that would have been anchored in that concrete foundation that's a part of the pump house structure. And this is a graphic with regard to operating the Allen Water Station. Today, the dam is flanked by gabions, as you see here coming on downstream. And a trickle of water comes out of the ceramic pipe that you see has been extended here, actually, because the pipe is back in the wall. Three one-wheel railroad benches have been installed along the trail and provide a tree-covered setting for visitors who can rest there and can ponder, why did the Houston and Texas Central Railway install a dam to create this watering station while they could have used windmills, while they used windmills to provide clean water at numerous other locations along the route from Houston to Red River City. And in closing, I just want to thank the following folks for their contributions to the preservation of the old stone dam. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. And if any of our viewers have questions for Alan, please leave them in the comment section below.